My friend Zoltan Vass, we've known each other for quite a few years now. I've always enjoyed every conversation I had and thought it would be useful to have one that we put a record button in between us and have some fun talking about shit that matters. So, Zoltan, in your own words, who are you?
Well, first, thanks for hosting me, Minter, and I'm delighted to be here. So, my name is Zoltan Vass. Originally, I'm from Yugoslavia, but I'm Hungarian. Which is, it can be confusing for people. I'm a delivery and transformation director with focus on tech processes, people, and really into creating global collaborative environments. So all around, like tech processes and people, basically in a nutshell.
Tech process and people. I like that. Well, let's just circle back on your background. Yugoslavia before it broke up, and then Hungarian pre-Indo-European language. So let's just say that there's a lot of diversity already in those two particular thoughts. Yugoslavia, Yugo, many Slavs, and then Hungarian, not even attached to any other language, not even Basque or Finnish. So, how do you think that background, what things shaped you in your experience having grown up in that part of the world in the time that you grew up?
Well, this is a really interesting question, and the points that you raised, I never thought about this when it comes to Yugoslavia and diversity and stuff, which is actually it's really true. How that shaped me. I think because I'm Hungarian and I was again like I was born and raised in Yugoslavia, which then became Serbia thanks to the war. I always feel that a minority anywhere I go. Even it might sound a bit weird, but even if I go to Hungary, people can crack that I'm not from Hungary because of my accent and mentality and behavior. So like even if I go to Hungary, I feel that I'm sort of like not foreigner, but it's not my home. In Serbia again, that's my hometown, but it's made like Serbians around, and in the UK, it's pretty much the same, right? So I'm an immigrant, so it's a minority. So I think how that shaped me, it's really all around finding my way to succeed and find my way out of different situations, to push through and fight for myself and for my friends and family, basically, because yeah, it's tough. It's not easy. So I think like that definitely like had a quite a big like impact on me, especially like the 10 years like of the war as well. So it's because that's when everything like became like a lot more sharper when you're a minority in a country where everyone is like Serbian. So there is things come to the surface quite fast there. So
Yeah, so talk us through that because I feel like most of us in the Western world have lived this life of privilege, of not having to worry about a bomb coming over our head or being, stabbed by some unfriendly neighbor. These are topics that are rarely spoken about on my podcast for sure. And I would and in light of the existing wars that are now on the news more frequently, so closer to us, but still very far from our reality. What was it like? And tell us about when you were there, what ages you were, and how did you experience that?
So I was 9 years old when the war started, and I was 19 when it finished. So it was 10 years. I finished the primary school during that period and my GCSE as well. Again, like I was young at that time, right? So I remember that when it comes to, for example, these COVID lockdowns, we had that multiple times when you just can't leave the house, for example, and we were under embargo, so we couldn't leave the country either. So it was really a locked environment for 10 years. And so we had, for example, periods when where we were receiving vouchers from the government and we had to queue to get bread and milk and cigarettes for our parents. So all these things, I guess like at that point, because when we were kids we found it was like fun, so we made fun out of it. I'm pretty sure that like it impacted one way or another like all of us, you know, like as kids, were not aware of all this. I'm not sure, you know, like, I mean, like when it comes to our parents, that was a different ball game. So yeah, sometimes I'm trying to, you know, figure things out, how that, you know, like impacted me, why I'm doing things now, because I like to take and just to make sure that, you know, like I'm, you know, the best version of myself all the time. So so I go back to that period sometimes to understand why things are happening, because I believe that there is, you know, a relation to our childhood and how we have been raised, what we learned. So the education process from early age is just so important.
So I'm wondering in my head, probably haven't really discussed this with you, but if you've experienced those type of lockdowns, what happened to you in the one that we had to live through in London, where you were with me at the time?
So when the pandemic started in January, I mean, like it didn't start. I just saw that something is happening in China. I was like, okay, what will happen if if it becomes suddenly like a global pandemic? I was like, okay, like people will be in their homes, and whoever can work from home, they will work from home, right? So that's when it comes to the remote working angle. And so actually when it kicked off in January, I didn't have a job because I'm being made redundant in November 2019. That's when I left my, you know, job. And then things started picking up in January 2020, you know, and then sort of, you know, like around February, we started seeing that, you know, things are here, right? And then at that time, because I did not have, you know, like any income and any job, I was like, I didn't know like what's happening. The only thing that I knew that I can't allow to become sick. So basically what I did, I bought, you know, like food and stuff that I needed. And I basically locked myself down to my 2-bedroom flat in London for 23 days. I didn't leave the flat just because, you know, like I didn't want to get sick. I wanted to put my head down and focus on finding a paid job. And that's what I was doing. So I just shut my mind down and then just, you know, like focused on finding something.
And it didn't trigger any memories of the lockdowns that you suffered through when you were in Serbia? Is that or it didn't make you more habituated or anything, or it was just a completely different experience for you?
It was a different experience, but it didn't really, you know, like trigger anything. I had a few memories. So when we were kids, so even when we had these lockdowns, for example, I know that like when we were not allowed to leave the house and when it was dark, we just sneaked to our neighbors and we played, you know, like around, you know, like in their houses indoors. And when we didn't have electricity, we had candle lights and, you know, all these fancy stuff. So these memories came back when we had these lockdowns. And this is more about, you know, when I remember these, I mean, like lockdowns during the war, because we were kids, we made some fun out of it. So I think that's how we handled the situation. And it didn't really trigger anything negative. So I was trying to, I guess, you know, like to build on this.
In listening to you, it makes me think that being kids about these types of topics could also be of interest for us as adults.
You mean which topics?
Well, the idea of playing and then sneaking out somehow, the idea of play, the idea of risk. Um, I feel like we live in a society where, even though we're not surrounded by war, we're completely intolerant of risk. And if you've been through war, you have a different scale, I think, I imagine anyway, of what is risk.
Yeah, that's an interesting point that you raised because so let me give you an example. So where my, you know, where I lived in our house, there was a radio tower. I think it was like 100 meters far from our house. And so when all these, you know, like bombarding and stuff started, we got news that it could happen that they will bombard that, you know, like radio tower. I mean, like that was concerning because, you know, like it's 100 meters is not a lot. You know, like if they're dropping a bomb from an airplane, 100 meters is nothing. You know, so and we lived like that for quite a while. And I don't know, like somehow it was interesting because I remember sometimes, you know, like when I was passing by the radio tower, I was like, I need to be fast So I have these memories, and then I think at some point we just adjusted because we didn't know like what to do or where to move, right? Like you're just in that situation and just have to deal with it somehow, which I don't think it was healthy anyway, but like that's a different topic. So when it comes to your point to intolerance, it's yeah, that's definitely like an interesting one.
So you arrived in England, and you position yourself in this project management, transformation, everything. You also said that you have a sort of an apatride, or a sense of not being at home anywhere, whether it's back in Serbia or in Hungary. And then you arrive here. Do you to what extent do you find yourself in any communities that are Hungarian or Serbian or in London, or have you resisted that temptation? How do you find community in London?
Wow. I love the question. So this like people ask me, like, where's your home and stuff like that. So things definitely changed a lot since I lost my mom, because she was really close to me. And so my brother lives in Budapest. I'm here. My dad is back in my hometown. I have friends like in Hungary, a few of them, like still in my hometown. My home is here in the UK. I moved here 12 years ago, and I built my life here from scratch. So when I moved here, I avoided Serbian or Hungarian communities on purpose, because I wanted to learn the language. I wanted to pick up the culture. I just wanted to, I didn't know anything about, like cultural differences, for example, when I arrived. So I just wanted to immerse myself into the language and into London. And it was the best decision I ever made, to be honest. And since I moved to St. Albans, and I'm enjoying myself here. It's just the mindset of the people, and it's just different. And I'm not chasing any Hungarian or Serbian communities and stuff like that. So it's more about the people and their mindset, the values, ethics, morals they bring to the table. That what's like what's really important to me.
All right, so I'm going to just jump into a little bit of a political hot potato topic, which is immigrants and immigration. When I look at you, Zoltan, I see a perfect immigrant, imperfectly perfect, if you will, because no one's perfect, but a
Thank you.
lovely,
Yes.
desirable immigrant. And then there's a lot of topics, and by the way, I'm an immigrant too, um, but not quite as distant in that way. But we talk about how immigrants look at other immigrants, and sometimes it's with disdain at some other immigrants. So I was wondering to what extent the position of being an immigrant, say, with Serbian, Hungarian, Serbo-Hungarian, I should say, as opposed to Austro-Hungarian, which is what usually comes off the lips, right? Serbo-Hungarian um, immigrant in England has with regard to its culture and the view on immigration as it stands today, because it is obviously a hot topic.
Ooh. Um, so you're asking basically like what's my view on immigration, right?
Yeah, as an immigrant in the UK, you've gone through the process of integrating into the
Yes.
UK. You can have a position as a British citizen,
Yes.
or have a position more as an immigrant, and in that case, you can either be even more accepting of immigrants, or you
Yes.
can be looking at immigrants in a different way because they're not doing it your way.
I think for me, when it comes to immigration, is the most important element is that whoever is, like changing a country, moving into a different country, is accepting the culture, learning the language. It's just these fundamental things. And that's it for me. That's the bottom line. So anyone who is, like emigrating into different countries, this should be, like basics really, because you move into a different country. It's a different culture, different people, different mindset. That's that country, like they welcome you. The country welcomed you, right? So they gave you the opportunity to come in, to integrate into you to learn. So, you should be really grateful for that opportunity. And that's my approach. That's what I have been, always learning from my parents as well, how to be grateful and, like thankful. And that's how I look at everyone, to be honest. And
Well, we should spread that kind of a viewpoint. And I wonder to what extent, I was just listening to a podcast with regard to the Hungarian politics. Do you stay in touch with Hungarian politics? Because obviously the latest events in Hungary where Orban didn't do as well, and Magyar, Péter Magyar is in power, Magyar being Hungarian, I guess. Do you stay in touch with the politics back home, or do you just sort of clean the slate and stick with the UK?
No, I'm not following politics at all because I lived there 30 years, which means that, politics was involved in my day-to-day life everywhere. And so when I moved out, I was like, I just don't even want to, I'm not interested. And it's just doesn't affect me. And it's politics. So, like it's a delicate topic, different topic. And it's just what I learned that it's just, it's politics. It's
Indeed. Well, I'm with you on that. Yet, do I enjoy looking at how society views it? I think it's interesting to understand how people get triggered by, get excited by, or get apathetic.
emotional.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it is somewhat political, but greater tech advocates, the global tech advocates, and the London tech advocates with Russ Shaw. How did you get involved in that and then found this group, which I'm very happy to be a part of, with the remote work and future of work?
Well, it's a really good one because this changed a lot of things in my life, and I'm really proud that we kicked off this group and we grew, and we have such a fantastic people like around ourselves, and we built this community from scratch. So I mentioned earlier, when the pandemic started in January, I was thinking, what's going to happen? So my thought was, whoever can work from home, they will work from home. We just need a laptop and internet and we can carry on working. And this is exactly what happened. So my friend Jen McGinley, I spoke with her and she introduced me to Russ, and I saw what Russ, like the whole TL and GTA community is into. And so I told him that I would like to create the Declan Advocates remote working group. And he was like, okay, he was really, open and welcoming. And so we organized the first call. There were like 50 people, and he was surprised that there were like so many people turned up. And I think it was in March, something like that. And then we agreed that let's kick off the group. And that's when I invited my co-founder, Luisa Stinsma, and then the rest is history. So now we have more than 600 advocates from across the globe. So it has been a fantastic experience, excellent learning curve, and that's the most important things actually as well. That like the learning. So when it comes to Russ and like the learning, so I have been learning a lot from Russ. He's a role model for me, including Ben Brabin, Simon Halberstam, and yourself. And I have a coach, Esther Ivan, Luisa Stinsma, Louise, Jen, and Kylie, who are the core team of the Global Tech Advocates Future of Work now. And the learning element, the people around me, and it's fantastic, and I really enjoy it. So of course, like we have ups and downs, but it's great that we have managed to pull something meaningful together and pull all these people together as well.
All right. Well, tell us a little bit more about the mission of the GTA Future of Work. What are you trying to do with this group, including me?
So with the group, we are really trying to shape the future of work, which means we want to bring together all the people who are interested around future of work, whether they are visionaries or they just want to learn about best practices around processes, or they just want to contribute in shaping the future of work from the AI perspective or from the soft skills perspective. So it's really like a community around bringing together like-minded and open-minded people who are trying to shape the future of work and make sure that our voice is heard. So we are organizing different events. Recently we organized a really good event with Lloyd's Banking Group. So we are really trying to help people and support and make useful introductions, and get that knowledge sharing is really important, and make sure that like we still try and help and connect people as much as we can.
Well, which makes you a perfect person to talk about remote work as it stands today? Because during the pandemic, it was enforced, except for a few industries, of course. You've also had your experience working at CoderDog and in person at the Dorchester. And in certain jobs, being remote is possible. In fact, probably desirable if you're trying to work with coders around the world. That would make sense. Yet, are there things which need to be in presence, or at least most likely need to be in presence, like well, um, like proper relationships.
Yes.
I think you can do virtual relationships, but just like work, I wonder what your view is as companies try to handle hybrid and remote work. How should companies be going about this idea of cost cutting, getting rid of offices, paying people less because they don't have to pay for commuting, maybe? And I mean, there's so many wild topics within it. What approach how do you approach this question?
So I guess again, like as you mentioned, it really depends from, there is no silver bullet. And so fundamentally, it will come down to the leader, to the chief exec, how they want to run the company. That's fundamental. So what's important for them? And there are, like a lot of challenges and issues with companies. Do they want to work 100% remotely, flexibly, hybridly? So, like it's just, a lot of topics and angles there. So there are a lot of challenges around what technology to use, are the processes in place, what about soft skills, how to lead and manage remotely through a screen. It's just a different skill set. And how to approach this, it's really understanding the company culture and the people and the profile of the business, what can be done remotely and what can't be done remotely. Like fostering the culture within the company, you don't have to be in the office, because what I'm always saying is that like if you go back to the pre-pandemic world when we spent like 8 hours per day in the office, I'm always saying it's like maintaining a relationship. So let's say you have a wife, you have a partner, you spend like a lot of time together. So it means that if you're in the office for 8 hours a day, sometimes you just don't want to talk to people. Maybe you're tired, maybe you had something else, or you're just maybe an introvert, you can't focus. And then, maintaining relationships 8 hours a day in the office with strangers, it's challenging, it's demanding, right? And then it distracts us. So the productivity drops as well. And so that's why I'm more around talking about creating a 100% flexible environment where actually like people can decide, do they want to go to the office? Do they want to work from home? Do they want to work from a coffee shop? And of course, like we have that angle when people actually understand that, okay, we need to have, I don't know, we agree that we have an innovation workshop in the office, or we need to meet the client on site. We just go and get it done. But there is no enforcement that we have to go and be present, because the idea is that for 3 days per week, we have to, maintain the culture in the office. It doesn't work from my perspective, just because like we are people. There's a psychological element to this.
Well, I get that. I mean, for sure, many companies have terrible cultures, and therefore it doesn't prone for having people in the office, because that doesn't mean that you have a better culture. Yet, is it difficult to create a culture when you don't have in-person moments? There's an element of trust that I think is integral to establishing a healthy culture. And I wonder how, through remote, what are some tips that you have about at least fostering trust and creating some kind of culture? What are the angles that you think that a CEO or any leadership team should be focusing on when they want to try to create a better culture?
I think, like you hit the nail on the head when it comes to the trust element, because probably most of the problems are coming from this trust issue, that there is no trust. Like, how do I know that if you are at home that you're working? And so one thing there is like focusing on the outcomes. And the other thing is how I work is I always trust people, because so I have been, like in various different companies, I have been, like managing large matrix distributed teams. It's not possible for me to, control like 100 to 300 people. Even if you're in the office, it's not possible, right? So like it's the trust element, like needs to be there. So, like if we agree that you will get it done, and then there is, of course, how you hold people accountable, you have the right, like systems, tools, and, processes in place. And you trust that person that they will get the job done. Like that's you can't stress on that. So if they won't get the job done, that's what you can start questioning. I have this, because in software delivery, like in transformation, we have these problems or issues are coming up, like the whole delivery and transformation is around, like problem solving. So when I see that the project or something is not moving in the right pace, then I question it. So I just have a one-to-one and ask, like, what's the problem? Is it, like you don't have the right knowledge, you don't have the tools, you're distracted, you have, like some personal or private reasons. Just really understanding, like what's holding that back, why they are not delivering, why I'm not seeing the outcomes. And most of the time, like when you have these conversations, the people really open up and they really value this type of conversation, and that's how you can start building trust. Because if it's a personal reason, then you understand that like they are distracted, like whether they happen something with the family, health issues, something, so they just can't focus, right? So you can mitigate this risk. If it's a professional, let's say, like they don't have the knowledge or the skills, so like, okay, let's find someone who can mentor you, can like help you to overcome this challenge, you can learn, and then we can move forward. So that this is absolutely like critical for me when it comes to building the trust. And for me, like every leader should like their first step should be like, I trust my employees, my colleagues, everyone around me. And then if they are not delivering, if I'm not seeing the outcomes, then we need to sit down and discuss why. Because we all make mistakes, like we don't know everything. As you mentioned in the beginning, we are not perfect and we will never be perfect. So it's really that the soft side of things, the soft skills, the empathy. It's really important to build, like this trust and foster. And then this is how you can start, like building and fostering that culture where people start, trusting each other, trust their leaders, and they will really go above and beyond to get things done. And then you can rely on your team, and that's really powerful.
So what I hear, what you're saying, Zoltan, is you need to have, on the one hand, some kind of traceability or trackability of the delivery, so that you know whether or not the delivery will happen in the due manner, time,
Yes.
and style of output. And the second of all is to create the time for a more personal conversation, or let's say a more ad hoc type of conversation, unless maybe you would recommend typically having systematically only a daily or a weekly meeting, half an hour, and you check in with somebody. I suppose that's good, because in the other system, when you're at the office, while it doesn't mean you have culture, what you do have is a full body view in random moments. And so, as opposed to, I have a call with Zoltan at my weekly check-in at 9 o'clock on Thursday morning, and I'm going to get my makeup on, or I'm going to get my whatever on, so that I look good for that half hour with my boss. And then afterwards, you don't even know, but I'm not wearing trousers, right? I'm in my underwear, whatever. Um, and so be it. Yet there's a sort of an artifice that can happen when you're in a specific time zone, when you don't see anything else around me. You don't see that my house is burning, my cat is over here. I don't
Yeah.
have a cat, the house isn't burning. But and then when you walk by somebody, you see the body language. You might observe other types of emotions that are much more in those soft skills, in the empathy that you're talking about.
Yeah.
And so is it about trying to create online moments that are less transactional, in other words, not about a specific agenda, and you can have these other ways of learning and feeling into people?
Yeah, the key here is that you need to create a safe environment where people can open up and they know that they won't be thrown under the bus. And that's the key, because that's when they will start sharing. Because And then again, like when I don't see my team members on the screen, I'm not worried. We know, what we agreed, what needs to be done, and they just need to communicate if there are any problems, any issues, something. And because like we are working towards a timeline or a deadline or a go live, so it's really order on that safe environment to create a safe environment, and people will open up when they see that they can actually trust their like leaders, and they won't be stabbed in the back, because that's also like really important. So it's really important.
So I was reading on your website, zoltanvass.com. You write that your mission is to enable people to work remotely, create long-lasting relationships between humans, and unlock people's potential. So basically, a lot of humanity in all that. And at some level, the idea of remote and technology is often not so human. And so, how do you go about unlocking people's potential and creating these long-term relationships? You do it with me, that's for sure. Um, but in a remote capacity, what are some of the things that leaders should be thinking about as they try to encourage or not, anyway, remote work in their company?
From my perspective, you really just need to be direct and open, and you need to be able to enable and empower your, again, employees, colleagues to get their job done. So you, as a leader, you need to be there to support your team so they can carry on and get the job done. And that's absolutely crucial for me. And yeah.
So if I take the example of a group meeting, many companies might have a scrum on a Monday
Yes.
morning and get set and everyone. But old Jim over there, he isn't showing up. At least he showed up, but he's not actually on time. And so performance issue. And at 9 o'clock, Jim says, "Oh, I didn't do it again." Managing performance issues in a way that's effective and efficient. Um, do you make a stab at correcting him right away and saying, "This is the second time, Jim, you should be, we told you, now you're going to hurt the team"? Or do you say, you let that go and show the team that you're willing to let that go, which can say, "Oh, everybody should let it go, he's letting Jim go." Then you call Jim afterwards, and then you berate him and you take care of him afterwards. Is there a problem? But you've just let the opportunity slide as to how to stem the bleeding and set the example of, I don't tolerate things. So let's talk about, let's say, adjusting performance in a remote world.
Yeah, I mean, like this is a good example, actually, like what you mentioned, because, and I can give you a recent example when there was a tech lead. Like, it will be funny that, like if you will listen to this podcast, that he wasn't turning up on client meetings, and he missed two, which was really important because we just kicked off the project, right? And we really needed his input. And in a second meeting, I didn't feel good, and the team didn't feel good because we really needed his input. So then I had to, have a one-to-one with him and explain that this is just no go. It just doesn't work. Like, he lets the teams down, let the team down, the client. He puts us in an awkward situation. Nothing is moving, and we just need his input. So we just had a direct conversation. He understood, and that was it. I told him that, like if he has any issues, that he doesn't have a capacity, maybe, like he's over allocated, he's working on other projects, I need to know, because I need to know like what's happening.
Well, it
And
makes me think of the situation where you kind of need to set down the law ahead of time a little bit in order to eventually do it in public, because the ideal for me is to create a common law where we all understand and actually have inputs on how we're going to function together as a team. And if that happens, then you also could slide in, well, if someone doesn't show up in the way we have suggested as a group, then permission is granted to call you out on that in public, so that because we established that together. If oftentimes the boss does it in a sort of a submarine fashion, or at least kind of in their own unilateral way, which I see more often happening in public, the humiliation and all that, then you're certainly going to create car crash.
Yes, that's correct. Yeah, no, it needs to, because you don't know what's behind this, right? So but it's generally like it. This example, it was bad for everyone, and I didn't know why he didn't turn up. So this had to be addressed because we are not performing, things are not moving to the right direction. So this had to be addressed. And like if you just step back when it comes to the remote and flexible working, there is one key element here is ownership. Again, I understand that, like for example, remote working or flexible working is not for everyone. Maybe someone has kids at home or distraction, flatmates, it's just, different. But the ownership in remote working is so important. So let's say, again, if you are looking for a job and if you join a 100% remote working company, you need to be aware that it's 100% remote. Maybe they have other setups that you can work from coffee shop or an office or something like that. But if you are a person who needs to be 5 days in the office, then you need to apply for, like for that kind of job. So again, it's managing our own expectations as well, before we apply for a job too. So
yeah, well, I was just reflecting that in this situation you were talking about, the guy didn't even show up. See, there wasn't a time for public shaming. Not that I'm suggesting that's the right solution, but in certain contexts it could be. So this idea of flexible and hybrid, I wonder what your position is with regard to the idea that people who want to work from remote might or should get paid less than people who want to come into the office, commute, and spend that time getting into the office. Because there are two schools of thought on this.
yeah, I think, like there is definitely, like an argument around this everywhere. And for me, it always comes down to the value that the person brings to the table. That's one thing. I also understand the argument where you live. I don't know, like somewhere else where it's the rent is a lot cheaper, but I'm not too convinced that that's how we should pay our people. So it's definitely, not an easy one to crack, to be honest. But for me, it's really what the value that the person brings to the table. That should be that should be valued really.
Well, there is another school of thought that is, well, since I don't have to pay for office space, I'll share the profits with you.
Yes.
Good luck with getting that to pass. So let's say in the pandemic, it was somewhat easier because, somewhat only because it was mandated. You had to work at remote. We all figured it out, cats and all, right? And we have Wi-Fi and there's indulgences because you didn't have the room, and then your computer was too slow, whatever. We had different things that we accepted in the ability to impose 100% remote. Now, hybrid, where you have the option, some people always want to come in, some people always want to work remotely or not. How do you go about crafting a hybrid strategy where choice is now crept in and it's not a mandate?
So this is what I was talking about. So it's not about hybrid, it's about 100% flexible environment, because that's when you give the person the option. You can be in the office 5 days if you want, you can be 3 days in the office if you want, or you can work from home whenever you want, or 5 days from home, right? So that's the flexibility angle. And rather than, saying you have to be 3 days in the office, like Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. So this is, my view on this. So it's really around creating that flexibility rather than trying to put people into boxes, and they can make their choice.
All right, so I want to push back a second and say that another way of looking at it might be around the customer. And if you can supply the customer the experience, then that's all that matters. Let's say just focus on that person as opposed to flexibility with regard to the employee.
So how do you mean, like focusing on the customer?
Right.
Like
So in order to provide the prescribed customer experience that we all
yes.
agreed we want to provide, what do we need to do? And so that might mean, for example, having a physical store on the street, which means it can't be hybrid. I mean, unless you want to have robots running around your store. we'll talk about the future work next, but there are things which, in order to provide the experience that we wish to give our customers, being in person might be the better way. And I'll give an example that is hybrid, but I used to run a company, and we'd have a regular week talking about production cycles, the production of all the marketing materials, for example, and the delivery of products and such things. We always had people who were remote at the factory, at the warehouse, at the agency, and they were all on the spider phone at the time. So there was a remote aspect. It wasn't usually visual. However, what I noticed was that it was typically much more effective for us to be in the room, because side conversations would happen. We'd pass notes to one another, and you can do that in the chat, but there's an element of seeing people engaged where you see full body off the screen. Whereas when you have a screen full of 20 images, it's really hard with just the top of your body on available to really capture things. And in my opinion, while it sometimes was a little longer because, well, we allowed for more organic elements, you got a better feel of efficiency through, or effectiveness, I should say, rather than efficiency, because it was longer through in person. So we would mandate the hybrid, a more in person. If we could, we would prefer in person for that meeting around production cycles and very much projects and finishing all that in person, because it was more, we were more intense, more committed, more available for each other, and therefore providing a better experience for our customers.
Well, again, like, I'm sharing my experience and like what I'm seeing and what I have been experiencing. So I think, like, here is this social element of the work environment and the work, right? That it's sort of, like, being mixed up, right? So, for example, what's happening now with me, it's 100% remote working company. We still have an office in London. We occasionally go in, but when we go in the office, we agree that we go in, but that day is not productive. We are mainly socializing. We are talking about each other, like, and this and that. So it's this social, element. And I also noticed and realized that we a lot more appreciate each other's presence when we meet less. So, because there is more depth. So, for example, I didn't meet you for quite a while, right? So, but when we meet, there is this something that comes from inside that, oh, I really want to meet Minter, like, just have a good chat, have some, maybe a good food, just a good laugh, and we are really present in that moment. But if we were to do that on a weekly basis, that would be a bit like, it's just becomes like a commodity. And that's where I see that if you create this remote, flexible environment, and let's say you get together in every once a month or in every 3 months, the people will appreciate those moments and they will really immerse themselves into those conversations. And that's how you can really foster a proper culture, because nothing is, forced, because people want to be there. Because I work remotely, but I love to meet people, to be honest. And sometimes, like, I don't want to meet people, because when I work, I'm a lot more productive when I'm by myself and I'm not distracted. Like the deep focus angle, I can do a lot more. But I also like to socialize. So it's really having that social element when we are socializing and when we are working. It's just separated. And yeah, that's my experience as well.
Well, what I like about that is being intentional about the moments of socializing, and therefore sort of plotting it in and giving it the time. Because, like a 15-minute catch up is not a catch up. You're going to be transactional. Oh, listen, do you have the paper for me? Did you sign it? Whatever. Whereas if you give it a social time, maybe even within work hours, it reminds me of a meeting we used to hold at Redken, where we had a thing called, I think it was called the Talk on the Street or something like that. And we would do all the birthday celebrations, so very personal. We would have somebody talk about some kind of success factor, and then we would have drinks afterwards, but not during the daytime. In other words, giving time out of the workspace time to socialize, because we always recognized that people had families and wanted to get back. but that was, quote unquote, wasted time getting to know each other. So good examples. All right, let's talk the last bit, Zoltan, about the future of work. So we've been talking a lot about your past. We've been talking about things that have been happening now. And if you were to say future of work and not mention AI, I'd be saying, whoa. So, but please, what is your version of the future of work? And let's say in 10 years' time, are we all working with AI? Are we all remote? Are we all out of a job? What do you think is the future of work?
Okay, so for me, it's bright, vast, and blue. So
Love
it will
it.
be nice, So, but besides that, it will be location agnostic, thanks to the space technology, diverse and human-centric with more mindful people, and everything will be underpinned by technology because technology is just driving everything. So we really need to pay attention on making sure that humans stay in the middle of this transformation because we have to stay in control. And we need to make sure that we stay humans and we don't dispose each other. And that's really important that we make sure that if we focus on that. And technology can surround us and underpin everything, but we need to make sure that we as like people, we just go back to our roots and start connecting with each other in a different and a more meaningful way, rather than just like becoming transactional, because that's not what we need to do.
So, what about the 4-day week? There are certain organizations that have moved to the 4-day week and have had quite good financial success, as well as kind of a motivation factor within the employees compared to other companies. Do you think a 4-day week is something that is in the cards for companies, or is that just a pipe dream for most?
Oh, it's definitely, like on the agenda, and this is something that I would like to pick up with the Global Tech Advocates Future of Work group as well, because I mean, if you just look at our example, if you work by Friday, like you're exhausted, like the productivity drops like significantly. Like what we are doing on Friday is just, it's not really a work. So we can do a lot more, like from Monday to, like, let's say, like 4-day a week. And we really don't need that 5th day. And then if you give people to take the time off, whether like they are learning, spend time with friends, family, just go outdoors, just do something, that will increase the productivity. And again, people are asking how you can create, like, because again, like if you work 4 days, if you work with clients, how do you align yourself? You can also create, for example, something like shift patterns. Let's say from 1 month, Minter works from Monday to Thursday, Monday to Friday, and then the next month, Minter will work from Thursday to Friday. Yeah. So like, sorry. Yeah, so one week you will be off on Monday, like in 1 month you will be off on Monday, and then the second month you will be off Friday, right? So you can create this, and basically how you build your organization, the operations around 4-day work week. And yeah, I don't see that the productivity drops, and that's it rather increases, because people will be grateful that they have a longer weekend, so they will be delivering a lot more during that 4-day work week. And that's where they like they will be focusing on. So 100%, that's 4-day work week. Yeah,
All
that's
right,
coming.
cool. All right, and let's talk about the last sort of more um, almost philosophical element, which is things like sleep, food, spirituality, purpose. Do you think do you think a company that wants to be successful must integrate those types of questions into the work site, workforce, and work cycle? Or is that just for a certain type of culture and the rest just will have to live as they are and will be able to survive?
Wow, I mean, like, this is a good question, and this goes back to the question that you asked earlier, how you create and foster a culture. So for example, if you start caring about your people around, like what they are eating, how they are asleep, their purpose, it's really the soft side of things, right? And so this is how you start creating and fostering a meaningful culture, because people will see that actually you care and you want to retain them, right? So if you understand their personal circumstances. If they work remotely, you can support them with various I don't know, food vouchers, or when it comes to mindfulness, body and mind. If they have, for example, if they are not productive, it can happen that they like they are not sleeping well. So it's really like the soft side of things, and this is where you create culture. And you don't need to be in the office to have these conversations. It's really just paying more attention to your people who are in the company. And this is how you will be able to engage and retain your employees, because they will be grateful that you are actually like you care about them, rather than just it's a just transactional employee and employer relationship. And that's really powerful.
Well, I recall in my time at Redken, I had this amazing woman working with us called Anne Mincy, to name her. I called her unofficially the director of love within our company, and she would do things like meditation and breathing exercises. And at the time, and we're talking back in the year 2000, we were doing this. It seemed very woo woo. Yet I'm trying to reconcile the challenge between um, being spiritual and lovely and performance. And there's a pragmatism that needs to happen. So sometimes you just got to do shit, and you have to work 20 hours in a row. So having that ability to compromise your desired situation, and it brings up this topic of resilience, where sometimes you just got to do shit.
Yeah,
And
exactly. I mean, yes, that's correct. So I can give you another example. So it was a year and a half ago, and we were delivering large transformation project, and the client was in the US. We had around 80 people on the UAT, and I had a team in Eastern Europe, and we had to stay up until 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, like 2 and 3 days in a row. And I discussed this with the client, and I discussed this with the team as well, which we set boundaries. We said, we're not going to do this, forever, but with this, like within these few days, we have to. So there was, we agreed, and we just, like got the job done. And there was, of course, like the reward element after this, because we needed that and the rest, because you need to bounce back, right? So that's really important. But yeah, so there is this element when you can, when you are exploring, you have the softer side of things, but at the same time, there are periods when we just have to get the things done. And that's and if you can explain this to people, and if they understand, it's simple. It's really simple. You just need to be, always honest with them and explain it, and that's about it, really.
what I like about what you said here is this notion of setting boundaries, sort of setting some kind of limit on the torture, if you will, so that we have an explanation that we're going to work for 3 days straight. Tell everybody, all your close friends, you're not, but then afterwards, I'm going to give you 2 days off. So the reward and rest is sort of baked into the torture. And the second thing is explaining why. And in the why, why we have to do this. We have to do this because we agreed, hopefully, as a team on a certain goal. And if we can tie things back to either at least a project goal, or better yet, a purpose that unites us and is commonly understood and agreed to, if you will, then it makes that why more powerful, more integrated, more, to use your word, owned. The ownership becomes more effective. And instead of complaining, oh, Zoltan told me I have to work for 3 days, it's more like, well, this is my problem, my project, I own it. And on top of that, I know that in 3 days' time, I'm going to be able to have the boundary that allows me to rest.
Yeah, I mean, like the key here is it's team. It's all about team. It's not one person, like telling that, like now you have to do this. It's a team agreement, because, and that's absolutely fundamental. The team needs to buy in, and they need to understand why we are doing this, and they need to understand the boundaries. They need to sign up for it. The other key element was here that we had fun during these 3 days, because we knew that there was like a lot of pressure, really long hours. We still had to have like short breaks. So there were times when we sent, other colleagues off for a break, just go out, go for a walk, take a nap, something, and we will cover you, right? So we had this element as well. It's really the team spirit and having fun. And we had laughs, and we were cracking jokes and stuff like that, and that helped us to like to push through these times, because it is tough when you have a large team and you need to work like until 2 3 a.m. in the morning, and you need to be productive, you need to generate outcomes, and it's tough. So it's tough, but that's again like if the team, the cohesion, if it's there, it's really powerful.
Well, it goes back to the very beginning of our conversation, Zoltan, when we talked about as children, you played to get through the lockdown. And it reminds me of a post that I wrote recently and citing work by Jordan Peterson, who talks about the importance of inserting play as adults into our lives. And he argues as well into work. And so, on this happy note, let us play. Zoltan, how can someone come play with you or get your services, read about what you're up to, know more about the GTA Future of Work think
So
tank?
they can visit my website, www.futureofwork.uk, and they can find all the information there, my phone number, my email address, and a link to Global Tech Advocates Future of Work if they want to join the community, because it's free. Anyone can join, and we are all volunteers, and we are welcoming anyone like from across the globe. So you're more than
Very
welcome to join.
good, Zoltan. Always fun to chat with you. Thank you for coming on, my friend, and look forward to hanging out for our regular, hopefully, meetup.
Thank you so much, Minter.